So, you want to know how to make websites better. Good. Howdy. I am Non of Information Highwayman, and you are watching Friday's Ace of Spades website review. And today you're going to learn 3 ways to discourage prospects from clicking on calls to action. Obviously, you want to encourage them, and you will learn this also. As our test case, we're going to be looking at www.howtomingle.com. This is being kindly nominated by Parker, and Parker, I apologize if I tear your site to pieces too much. I'll be using the Frodo conversion rate checklist, as I usually do. And remember that Frodo stands for First Reaction, Orientation, Desirability, and Offers. The core of the checklist lies in the ODO, Orientation, Desirability, and Offers. And of course, it's important that these elements get attention using contrast and iPath. Alright, let's talk about first reaction first of all. How does the site make me feel? Let me have a look. This is a very instinctive kind of reaction. It's an emotional snap judgment. There isn't a lot of consideration involved, which is why I don't spend too much time on it. The site makes me feel okay. Doesn't really grab my attention very much. Doesn't make me feel like there's anything bad going on. It's just kind of a generic looking blog. Nothing to really write home about, but I don't feel like I'm in a terrible place, and I'm very likely to have a look through if I've come here through a search engine or referrer. I'm certainly not going to click away in haste or disgust, and I'm probably not going to have any kind of particularly poor conceptions of the site as I look further. Orientation is about the question, am I in the right place? And this has to do with where your prospect actually thinks he is. In this case, orientation element here right at the top, nice and easy to see. Learn how to become a 24/7 attractive person. That's pretty clear. So if I've come here looking for information on that kind of topic, I'm certainly feeling like I'm in the right place right now, and even if I've come here not knowing anything about the place, I now have a good idea of where I am. So that's looking good. Desirability is where it's all at, and this is about the question, do I believe I'll gain more than I invest? In this case, because this is a blog, there's probably not a huge amount of investment that I'm actually being asked to make. There are a couple of things which we need to talk about, however. Investment can mean time. Time, in fact, is a very serious investment for a lot of people. And although this isn't the sort of blog where you're going to have business people charging their time against the company looking at it, it nonetheless does need to give users a good reason to stick around and read what's here. Now, the posts themselves are obviously one of the key ways that you're going to convince people to hang around and show them that what you're offering is in fact desirable. But as always, a headline is very important, and a headline is sorely lacking here. Now, you could argue that how to become a 24/7 attractive person is a headline, and in a way it is, but I'd also recommend having some kind of further explanation before you get to the actual blog posts. It's always good to have a little bit more to hook the reader in and entice him before you start showing him random blog posts. And the reason for that really is because blog posts change all the time. A reader has an instinctive understanding that what he's seeing isn't necessarily going to be best representation of the site itself and about whether it's desirable. So having keynote content is good, but having some kind of introductory content is also a really good idea above the blog posts. Speaking of keynote content, offers on a blog really comprise A, sign-up forms, and B, keynote content. Obviously, any kind of post really is an offer to read it, but in this case we have a whole bunch of keynote, or what you might call core content, or a lot of people have different names for it. I just call it keynote content. Let me quickly talk about the sign-up form here, though, before I get into the main point that I want to make today. Get my free star ebook. I'm fairly sure that the star is supposed to be on both sides of the free, and the reason I'm fairly sure is that when you do that, it means that you're emphasizing the word. When you put a star at the end of a word, or an asterisk, I should say, at the end of a word, it means that there is some kind of catch. It means that you should look down to the bottom of the page for a star at the footer, but there isn't one. So I'm going to suggest that you just get rid of that and actually just make that bold. And now I'm going to talk about the main things that I want to talk about, which is these are essentially call to action buttons. And they're offering different things. One is offering an ebook, and the rest of them are offering various blog posts. There are 3 things wrong with them. The first thing is that this one is really good for this. It looks like a button. It's very important if you want to make your calls to action stand out and actually be clicked on to make them look like buttons, because this could really be anything. They just look like images with text over them, and although you kind of suspect that they're clickable, you don't really get a feeling that they're actually a call to action. They could be anything. The second thing is that you need to be sure that you don't superimpose text or letters over an image. And the reason for this is that images are very visually dominant. So when you look at an image and there's text sitting over it, you tend to ignore the text. Especially when you've got more complex images as well. If you've got a variation in your images, these ones aren't too bad. But in cases where you've got a lot of different colors or a lot of different textures or contrasts in an image, having text superimposed over it can be very difficult to read. It can sometimes be impossible to read the text. And even in cases like this, where it's not too difficult to read, your readership will go down significantly, as much as 50%. The third thing is that you need to make sure that your calls to action actually start with some kind of a verb. And the reason for that is that they're actually asking a user to take an action. Calls to action are all about, surprisingly enough, action. In the case of the first one, I want that ebook now, that's a sentiment, it's an assertion, it's something which you obviously want your user or your prospect to feel, but it isn't an action. You could say, above the button, I want that ebook now, and then in the button you could have the text, click here to get it. That would work well, and that fits in with the general principle of calls to action, wherein you would need to have more to the call to action than just the button itself. Having text above it is a very good idea, but it's not necessary. In terms of these calls to action, it's certainly not necessary. Similar thing here, how to fit in, 5 ways make anyone love you, get people to love you. These are all assertions or propositions, and they are not actions. Click here to find out how to fit in. Click here to see 5 ways to make anyone love you. Get people to love you works because that is actually beginning with a verb. That's cool. Secret to being loved or liked. Find out the secret to being loved or liked. And so on. So, summarizing. Use visual cues to alert prospects that this is in fact a button. Start your button text with a verb, like click here. In fact, let me just say now, click here still gets the highest click rate of any kind of verb beginning that I know of. If you start your call to action buttons with click here, they will tend to get clicked more often. And that's simply because you're telling your prospect exactly what to do. And avoid superimposing text over images because it is difficult to read. It's always a good idea to have a button that looks like a button, usually with a gradient is a good idea. So colors and gradients and even some kind of bevel on it certainly work well, but you want to avoid images. Not that images are bad, but they're not good on buttons. If you're making any of these mistakes on your current website, I would suggest that you fix them. I think you'll see your conversion rates go up. Comments, questions, or hate mail, as always, I must here pause to thank Jono from Arctic Kiwi for sending me hate mail. It was hilarious. But if you have any comments or questions, or even anything that you would like to say I did wrong, you are very welcome to email me, non@informationhighwayman.com. And if you found this screencast in any other way than through the Ace of Spades, my sort of daily email newsletter, then you need to sign up, because there are plenty more coming where this one came from. So sign up for that. It's free. It is informationhighwayman.com/ace. Until then, I will see you around. I am Non.